जी हैं ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਅੱਜਕੱਲ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਸੋਚ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਦਰਜੀਤ ਕਾਲੀਰਾਏ ਆਪਣੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਚੋਣ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਨਵੰਬਰ 24 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਦੀ ਹੋਵੇਗੀ ਸੈਨੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਸੀਟਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਲੋਕਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਲੈਜਿਸਲੇਚਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਸੈਨੇਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਕਈ ਕਾਉਂਸਲ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੈਂਪੇਨ ਦੀ ਕਰਨੇ ਲਈ ਅੱਜ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਕ੍ਰਿਸ ਬਿਸ਼ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਨੇ ਕੈਲੀਫੋਰਨੀਆ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ 6 ਦੀ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ welcome to Aaj Kal America, Chris. I just gave a brief intro to yourself. You're a candidate for California District 6. I'd like to start with you giving us a brief intro to Crish Bish, the candidate for Congress.
Well, first, thank you for having me on and the opportunity to visit and for your viewers to get to know me. So I am married, live in Sacramento, California. I actually live in this district and have been a resident of Sacramento County since 1987 when moved back here from high school. Married my high school sweetheart, my husband Jim. In fact, yesterday we celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary. So it was just a blessing. We have 4 children and have been very involved in Sacramento politics in our community. We live out in Antelope, California. Now, I have a real estate business that I have operated for the last 20 years in and around the Sacramento area. I'm currently have my office out in Roseville. Prior to this, I was an investigator in a law firm, a local law firm for 10 years. And that's locating people, locating assets, locating witnesses. That was the crux of my job. But looking at what's happened to our society and the family structure, the attack that's on our family structure, I've been an advocate for education, educational rights, parents' rights, and to swing the needle, if you will, back on education, where we're working on fundamentals more than social indoctrination. I make no excuses for my passion for this country, my love of this country, and to see that the children that grow up here experience the same opportunities that I had as a child, and that to do that they have to learn about patriotism and the love of the country and the value of the family. And these are things that are being undermined in our public schools, in our judicial system, even when we start looking at family courts.
Well, thank you, Chris. And first, happy anniversary, belated as it may be. I'd like to continue with 2 topics. One, you said, your personal life, you're married and 31 years.
7,
and
37.
37, sorry. My apologies. But as far as children are concerned and education is concerned, there's 2 issues that come up there, most recent. One is if we reflect upon the recent Olympics and the women's boxing competition that was taking place, there has been some controversy raised on the fact that there was 2 participants who were disqualified in the World Boxing Championships that happened in the previous year, and they happened to have been in New Delhi in India. And the World Boxing Organization had told these 2 that they were not biologically women, therefore they could not take part in the women's competition. Contrary to that, the Olympics organization allowed these 2 to participate. One of their opponents, who was involved in a bout, after the competition was completed, she raised up her finger and in the X symbol. And many have reported that to imply that that person was more of an X than an XY. There's controversy in both of the medals that were awarded, the silver and the gold. In our own nation, a few weeks ago, the president issued an amendment to Title IX or a executive order, whatever we would like to call that, implementing a requirement that individuals who classify themselves as transgender must be allowed to participate in women's sports. Should you get elected come November and you get sworn in January, as an individual congressperson, I totally understand what you can and what your limits are and what you can't do. But should this issue be raised by the speaker of the day and it come to a congressional vote, where do you think women's sports should be individually protected and not allowed to be contaminated by this transgender population that we have? Nothing against the transgender people personally. As a Sikh, we believe in all of God's creations, and we all have the right to exist on this earth with equal opportunity, equal rights. But I believe those rights should be without diminishing anybody else's rights. So in the case of young girls' sports, college sports, Olympics, whatever it may be, and they're going to be in LA in the next cycle, 28. How would you, as a congressman, impact the protection of women's rights, women's sports?
Okay. Well, number one, I respect all people's choices as adults. However, this is, I'm just going to say it, this is a cosmetic surgery. You can change your appearance, you can change your hair color, but you cannot change who God made you, what you were intended to be. And what's going on with the transgender community and the assault on women. And that is exactly what this is. This is gender appropriation. Title IX came into effect to protect women, to give them equal opportunities in sports and an equal opportunity for the benefits of being a high school athlete. So we're seeing right now, not just in the Olympics, where these young women have trained, many of them have dedicated their lives from when they were very young to compete in these sports as women. And this is a direct assault on females, and I consider it gender appropriation. Now, if the Olympics or the Olympic Committee, colleges, high school want to adopt a co-ed program that includes and welcomes people who have this type of cosmetic and altering surgery, where it's you have the opportunity to decide who you're going to compete or the class in which you compete. But to do this to young women is criminal, in my opinion. And as far as my vote in Congress, I will vote to protect women and to protect women's rights and the integrity of our education and our sports system, which is the spirit of Title IX. Now, to take that to the next step, with Biden taking this extraordinary step to make this decision on his own, if we consider that he has the ability to make this decision on his own, I think it's an abuse of power. And we saw this with Obama with the Dear Colleague letter, where he essentially put men at risk, young men at risk, with a what do you call it, restorative justice. And the Dear Colleague letter, what it did was it said that if you are accused, if you're a young man and you were accused of sexual assault or some type of crime on a college campus, then you must be guilty. And just completely doing away with due process. So this is the next step, if you will, where the Dear Colleague letter was to put these things in motion, to divide people, to confuse our roles as men and women. We are beautifully different and designed by God to be beautifully different and to have different roles in society and in our family. That doesn't diminish our capabilities, our ability, or our thoughts or our thought process. It celebrates it. And to try and put us all into a same category, to make us all not equal in our ability or what we can achieve, but that physical disconnect. And I believe this goes beyond high school and sports. This dramatically affects national security. When you're blurring the lines between what men and women are physically capable of, or even what surgery and doctors and medical science are able to do. Because at the genetic level, we are still men, we are still women, and you cannot change that. And I wouldn't want to. So I believe that given the abuse of Title IX, the Dear Colleague letter, and other things that we're seeing in California, AB 1955, it's going to take an act of Congress to present legislation to protect the identity and opportunities for all individuals as they're born, not as they're altered or perceived to be.
Well, thank you on that, Chris. And following on from that, California, I think you mentioned, referenced at least the California bill. Our governor in California signed into law an issue that impacts parents' rights. So, as a
Correct.
parent, if one of our children was to voice doubt or ask a question about what they appeared to be or what they felt to be, then the authorities can go do literally a mechanical change of our child, but not tell us what they're doing, and we have no right to find out. As a congresswoman come January 25, is it anything that the federal government at the legislative level can do to make it a national issue that sort of parents have a right, or does it remain at the state?
No, it's already in the Constitution. The 14th Amendment guarantees the parental rights to be the caregivers and ultimate authority over their children. This is already written into the Constitution. California is violating the natural rights given to every parent. And what they are doing is they've passed a law to ignore due process. And due process is the only way to relieve a parent of their natural rights established by the 14th Amendment. So I would be surprised if there is not litigation already challenging the legality of this law, the constitutionality of this law. Just because Gavin Newsom passed it or signed it, and a group of people who do not have children who want to usurp that parent-child relationship, just because they sign it into law, does not mean that it is just and will survive the scrutiny of the Supreme Court. My prayer is that this is taken care of before I am sworn in, and that we have the opportunity to introduce legislation to prevent these type of abuses in the future.
Moving on to what a congressperson has influence over or can impact, some of it as through legislation or congressional activity impacts our economy. Maybe not reported so much, but we're seeing a lot of organizations announcing layoffs. Intel has announced layoffs, Amazon has, Tesla has. So if not in the rest of the country, we are experiencing significant layoffs in California. As a congresswoman in the legislative system, in the federal system, what could you do come January 25 to bring about some economic revving of the engine?
Revving of the engine. What an exciting way to put it. Now, before I answer that, I'm going to tell you the Intel layoff is about 12% of the workforce, and these layoffs are going to hit California the highest, but they and as particularly in our area in Sacramento, the campus out in Folsom, is that campus has already been closed. The majority of the workers there, which are high paid employees, have already been on work from home status. Those lights have been turned off, and that has damaged the economy. And that's people going to work and everything. It's the daycare system, people going out to lunch, purchasing clothing that is appropriate for going to work. So it's already impacted our local economy, and it is going to get worse. Now, what can we do at the federal level? Well, Congress, as you well know, we control the purse. It is the power of the purse. And we're in the worst economy I have seen since Jimmy Carter. This is unforeseen. And raising taxes, which is what we're seeing in California and across the board, it is not going to save our economy. This is something Kamala Harris has pledged to do. And it is Congress coming up with a balanced budget and making the hard decisions, reviewing things that can be cut, unnecessary expenditures, and then investing more in technology and investing more in schools. So when we start talking about revving up the economy, in doing that, it's scaling back on the social programs, but doing it responsibly and motivating people to get back into the workforce. I think a big part of this will be bringing back essential manufacturing for Intel and other tech companies. It's returning the manufacturing of chips and other devices to the United States. I believe this is not just an economic issue, but a national security issue. It also comes to education when we start talking about the economy slowing down, high-paying jobs, and the ability of Americans or American children to eventually enter this global workforce. The truth is, big tech companies like Intel and Amazon, Microsoft, they're forced to bring in and hire people from other countries. Because the truth is, American children do not have the educational foundation to do these jobs. Colleges are focused on social programs and indoctrination rather than focusing on educating students in their field to where they are able to compete on that global market. We have a lot of work to do, and these again are national security issues. When we do not have the workforce, the capability of doing the high-tech jobs that are necessary, as well as the blue-collar jobs, we are surrendering our sovereignty to other countries who will violate human rights in order to put out a cheap product, and it's at the expense of our society.
And thank you on that. And just following on from the national interest component, I recall that when COVID was an issue and there was a need for medical equipment and respirators and stuff like that, China, who was one of the biggest manufacturers, had limited our ability to buy those or even restricted it, claiming that they needed it first. So from a national interest, it can be defense, it can be medical, it can be technological. There's a lot of components there. There's another piece, which is agricultural land. And I recall back in the Bush days, there was an effort by a Chinese petroleum company to buy Unocal. And there was an effort in Congress and through the administration to prevent that from happening because oil and petroleum was seen as a national resource. What's happening in the last few years I've seen is agricultural land has been purchased by foreign entities en masse, and some of it is in California. Is there a possibility that with a administrative change and a congressional strength, the Congress could legislate to prevent foreign ownership of key components, medical equipment, medical pharmaceutical production capabilities, bring them back home. So we're not dependent on these third party suppliers. And you just mentioned chips. We had a transportation issue because our automakers couldn't get chips. So just
Right.
at a general level, is it possible that we could have legislation that would be encompassing enough to put these under national security or national interest?
Actually, the FCC already does that, and it prevents the foreign ownership of communication systems. So we're not reinventing the wheel, we're repurposing existing legislation and adopting it for all things that are national security, which is going to be education, manufacturing, the foreign ownership of farmlands. Now, there will be carve outs for that when we start talking about national embassies. And we have to be mindful of that as we are such a tight knit global community. And we do want to protect the embassies for other countries. But as far as our farmland, it's a national security issue. When we talk about, go back to COVID, when we were talking about the medical devices and how China was withholding them, saying that they needed them first. 80% of the antibiotics that are manufactured in China for use in the United States. Most of our medicines are manufactured overseas. What happens when they decide to start withholding medication? Or, God forbid, start contaminating our medications. Now, we have seen this coming out of China, where we found melamine in baby food and baby formula, where it's a direct threat to our children, to American citizens. We've seen this happen with pet food and other things that are manufactured overseas. I am a national security hawk. And not that I'm a protectionist, but I am a patriot and believe in the strength and security of our country. And these doesn't mean that we cut off all trade, but we've got to be smart about this and understand history. We saw this in World War II. Prior to World War II, we were selling off all of our iron to Japan. And when we were attacked, that we had massive shortages. This is a history lesson that we cannot afford to repeat.
Thank you on that. And sort of, I think we've covered the economy in general context and how foreign production, foreign investments impact us. We've covered the educational side, and I think we've addressed some of the medical issues component to it. But another side of the economy, and it's related to your profession, and as some of the rhetoric that we're hearing in recent days of sort of what the manifesto or the planned approaches of any new administration will be, and to controlling house prices and stuff like that. The mention that you had of the Intel layoffs or related to those layoffs, is there a possibility that we will see an impact in housing prices? So it may not need any legislative intervention?
All right. Well, California, as opposed to any other state in the union, when they're building houses here, just because of the way all of the fees and assessments and studies that are required for new housing, half the price of a house right now, a $800,000 house, half of the cost of that house is spent before they even break ground, and it is it's abusive, and in my opinion, maybe unconstitutional when we start looking at the taxation without representation. That these are taxes. It may I'm torn on this, whether this is something that has to be addressed at the state issue or as a federal issue. We have to reclaim our vocabulary. Now, what do I mean by this? It's the definition of a tax. And we've seen the Supreme Court begin down this road by stripping the power of the agencies to enact laws or regulations that mimic laws, that they are the sole body that can enforce them, that can fine. And I think we need to do this with our vocabulary. And again, starting with the definition of a tax and what is abusive. We have to be respectful of states' rights, but we also have to look at the abusive policies that are being enacted across this country. California, if we do not get the act together in California, either locally or through federal legislation, we are going to see the cancer that is growing in Sacramento spread across the country. We're seeing a mass exodus out of California. We lost a congressional seat during redistricting because of the number of people moving out. And when these people leave, they're taking their politics with them. So what is happening here, the abuse of legislation, this is of interest of everyone in this country. We've got to put the brakes on and establish limits to what government can do. And we're seeing, we go back to AB 1995, where California was very willing and anxious to pass law that violate the Constitution. And it is the job of the House of Representatives to stand in their way. And I promise you, I will stand in their way and fight not just for California, but for my grandchildren, for your grandchildren, and for our future, for our country. We've got to get back on a side of just common sense and putting people before policies. And, just go ahead and say it. And these weird ideas about biology and humanity, we've got the inmates running the nut house right now.
And I totally understand that. And in the interest of time, we have to sort of put a closure to our conversation. But look forward to discussing with you further and at a new opportunity. If not before November, then after January, when you're sworn in as a congressperson for District 6 in California. But appreciate this opportunity. And for the last few moments we have, would you like to share details on how people can reach out to you, share their views or learn your views and work with you to bring the success for November?
Absolutely. You can reach me on the internet at bishforcongress.com. The website is bishforcongress.com. I am on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's uniform, bishforcongress.com. You can email me directly at Chris, CHRIS, at bishforcongress.com. We are just have an amazing campaign. It is positive energy. We have a lot of negative things going on, but the campaign is focused on hope and change and the things that we can do to empower individual people. And it's irrespective of age or race or religion. It's a campaign. It's just beautiful of different people coming together and sharing ideas, reaching out to individual communities. I am incredibly grateful for your bringing me here to touch a community that I may not otherwise have that opportunity. And it's rich with culture and love and a family structure that mirrors my own. Really want to express my love for everyone and get involved, come to the office.
Well, appreciate that. Wish you success and look forward to talking to you in between then and, now in November and then after that, come January. But all the best to you. And we'll keep sharing ideas. So thank you for this
Excellent.
opportunity to have you on the air. And anyway, all the best to you. And we have to bring closure today. So thank you. ਹਾਂਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ
Thank
ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਅੱਜ
you.
ਕੱਲ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਸੋਚ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਸੀ ਕ੍ਰਿਸ ਬਿਸ਼ ਜੋ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਕੈਲੀਫੋਰਨੀਆ ਕੰਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ 6 ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਥੋੜੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਖਿਆਲਾਤ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੁਣੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਰਨਾ ਮੰਗਦੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਨੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ 'ਚ ਜੇ ਇਹ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਹੁਣ ਦੇਵੋ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਸੋਚ ਟੀਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਦਰਜੀਤ ਕਾਲੀਰਾਏ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਗਲੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਜੀ